What is up, my Squirtleites? It is I, your king. In today's video, I do decree, and it's a very simple decree at that, and that's that Paper Mario is a masterpiece. To clarify, I specifically mean Paper Mario 64 as well as Paper Mario and the Thousand-Year Door. And to some, that might be a blatantly obvious statement to make, while to others what I just said is heresy, based on your viewpoints towards many things, including the Mario class of RPGs as a whole, as plenty of people don't even think Paper Mario is Mario RPGs at their finest. A lot of people think Super Mario RPG or Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga are better. Cool, that's fine. I'm not here to argue about that, as I have no points to make on that matter. My point today is about the transcendental nature of Paper Mario and how these games are not only good, but they're truly timeless, which is a seriously underappreciated and often misused word in discussion and debate. First, let's talk about that word, timeless. Constantly, this word is synonymously used alongside discussions of the greatest games of all time and as a substitute for the term classic. This is wrong. If you've ever done that, stop doing that. Classics can be timeless, but they are not all such. When you say a game is timeless, you're declaring that it shows little to no signs of age and will not for years to come, while classics are hallmarks of their current age. Now, obviously, in its purest form, being truly timeless is impossible. Hardware and software are ever advancing. Cultures change, and people's understanding of how to make games will always evolve, so no game can be fully immune, but they can blur the lines if they're smart. They can achieve levels of presentation and storytelling as well as gameplay that nail down the fundamentals perfectly. Again, circling back to what we often consider the greatest games ever, and you know what I'm talking about, Ocarina of Time, Final Fantasy VII, Super Mario Bros. 3, Half-Life 2, etc. As great as they are, those games will not appeal to generations of the future the way they have in the past. They are hallmarks of their individual eras, the pinnacle of what was achievable then, not now. The Legend of Zelda has since evolved its gameplay considerably beyond what Ocarina of Time was capable of. Final Fantasy is one of the most visually remarkable IPs in the industry, while 7 was, Super Mario Bros. 3 is still a fantastic foundation for so many great 2D platformers, but the genre has evolved light years beyond that rock-solid core. And Half-Life 2, while taking what a game like Halo did and improving it in every way successfully, still has mission structures and elements that nowadays we as a collective consider sins of game design. But let's take a look at Paper Mario, okay? Specifically, let's look at the Thousand-Year Door, as it is an overall improvement of the foundation that Paper Mario 64 set, improving upon the few things that needed actual improving while retaining the rest almost perfectly. Firstly, and of note, is that this game opted for art direction and design over any sort of high-fidelity graphics of the era. Take your standard GameCube game with quote-unquote realistic graphics and compare that to what we have nowadays. The leap is enormous. Now take Paper Mario 2 and compare it to a two-dimensional game of the same breed from our time. The difference is negligible only by the resolution limitations of the GameCube. With the same source file on a 4K resolution, you could easily show a screenshot of this game and convince someone that this game came out yesterday. The thing is that animation has a significant advantage over CG and attempts at photorealism. It allows for artistry and expressionism well beyond what the real world can achieve. Exaggeration and an abundance of color fit right in, while photorealism relies on dull and drab colors that, while sensible and fitting, is just not as exciting or as stimulating to the viewer and thus makes for a de facto more boring experience visually. Hello, Disney. With controls and gameplay, there's a similar argument to be made. The 6th generation of video game consoles was about when the general idea of how to move characters in three-dimensional spaces was perfected, and although technological boundaries weren't being pushed, the fundamentals for most high-quality games were about down. Something one might notice when playing a lot of PlayStation 2, Xbox, or GameCube games is that at worst, characters tend to feel floaty and glide around a bit, preluding to later generations where every character had a ton of weight and just moved slow because more realism. None of this is so with Paper Mario. There is no forced nor arbitrary need to add extra challenge or obstacle to the player's movement. There are no rules of the environment outside of the game's control. Paper Mario operates on its own rulebook. You can pick up the controller and move Mario around for all of 5 seconds and know exactly how to operate him for the following several hours of play up to the very end. Pausing for a second, I just want it known that I'm explaining all of this in detail because these are good examples of how a game can be classified as timeless. These sorts of design choices are capable of immunity and hold up across console generations. Now, getting back to what I was going after, lastly, let's talk about that gameplay. And this is something I have always praised Paper Mario for, very specifically in the RPG genre, but it applies to other games as well, and that is its mastery in simplicity. Paper Mario 1 and 2 are very stock, standard, and basic RPGs. In terms of the rules of engagement, the way the game functions, and the sorts of strategies that the player can craft, as well as the difficulty itself, these might be some of the most accessible RPGs ever made. But again, this is a huge advantage. The less mechanics there are to worry about balancing between one another, the more room the developer has to perfect each of these mechanics and ensure that they not only feel good, but hold up well over time. Complex RPGs, regardless of their quality, often cripple themselves with game-breaking mechanics that can render other forms of gameplay as either meaningless or simply impractical. Now, that's not to say Paper Mario doesn't have these problems, but the foundation on which it operates makes said problems less noticeable. There's a greater sense of harmony and balance within the rules of the game that other RPGs, and, well, most games in general, often muddy and make more confusing. There are other points I can make about Paper Mario, like its music, like its dialogue, all sorts of other things, and we could be at it all day, but I want you to pause and think about the perspective of where I'm coming from with Paper Mario and apply it to other video games and see how the pieces fit together. What other games can be construed as timeless beyond their greatness? Well, while you think about that, let's then discuss the importance of timelessness. And it's actually kind of simple, isn't it? It allows for generational bridges to be built. It allows for shared experiences for players of all ages, and with the right amount of support, it's healthy for the game industry as well. Appreciation of mechanics sends a message, folks. It's what makes games better, and while I'm absolutely okay with reminiscing over classic titles of yesteryear and even seeing those games remastered and improved, the importance of games that don't even need those improvements cannot be understated. This is why I actually don't like the hashtag that's been going around on Twitter lately, remaster Thousand Year Door. No, it doesn't need it. The game is better than that. Sure, update the resolution, I suppose, but that's honestly it. Putting aside Nintendo's track record of meddling more than is necessary in remasters, the Thousand Year Door can still truly be appreciated even all these years later by just about anyone. Re-release the Thousand Year Door. Let younger audiences appreciate its phenomenal sense of game design, its witty writing, and its charming world. All you have to do is break the barriers down, Nintendo. Don't make some bastardized clone. And let us as a community separate the discussion of timelessness and greatness. They can coexist without the need to spite one another, but also understand the importance and use that to, once again, improve our discussion on video games.